So welcome to CxXchange Success Hour. I'm so excited to see everyone here today. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. So excited to be talking to Santosh Sahoo today. He's the global consumption. Wait, well, you'll say what the actual director, global, consumption. Anyways, it's Salesforce MuleSoft. He's doing great things. He's on the cutting edge, innovating CS with his whole team, with all of Salesforce, and here with us today. So GTM Rewired, how CS fuels the AI usage economy. Super excited for this topic. And Santosh, please introduce yourself more properly than I have. In my excitement, I messed it all up.
I think we are in that world where the titles are irrelevant. I think impact is important, right? So you can call whatever yourself. But yeah, my background definitely I've been in CS for last 7 years. We created this net new team within MuleSoft and Salesforce. You'll start to hear more these kind of GTM teams coming up. So I had global consumption team for MuleSoft. MuleSoft is a product within Salesforce ecosystem. We got acquired in 2018, and we basically connect everything within your ecosystem, applications, data, devices, which is, as you know, when you implement any technology, the key part of it is integrating it to your ecosystem. That's where we play in. But I drive the consumption motion for that particular product, moving over from the CS team to set up this net new team. During today's conversation, I'll talk about how GTM in general is evolving with move to more of a consumption-oriented model. With AI, definitely it got started with infrastructure companies, but now it's becoming very mainstream with AI. So I'll talk more about it. Based out of New Jersey, New York is my office. So anybody in New York ever want to catch up, definitely drop a note. I'm at least a couple of days or 3 days in New York City for sure. You got in mute, Jan.
Well, I was just going to say, CxXchange is going to have an event on September 29th in New York as part of CS Week. So hopefully we'll be able to connect with you there too.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
I go to CS weekend here. I mean, the first year we did, yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dig in because the reason why I was so excited about this is I have been seeing a lot more of usage-based pricing and also outcomes-based pricing. But we'll be talking about usage-based pricing because AI is so expensive to use that, when your costs change, then your pricing model needs to change. And then that literally changes how you go to market. And I saw Santosh posting about it. Of course, we got started talking about it, and I thought we need to bring this topic here to CxXchange Success Hour. So let's dig into the slides, and then we'll kick it off. And as usual, if people have questions or comments, if you're working on these challenges as well, be sure to raise your hand and come off mute. Or if you put it in chat, I can't guarantee I'll see it. I'll try. But otherwise, if you come off mute, I'll definitely hear you. Okay. All right, let's dig in. So why the consumption model, Santosh? Do you want to maybe share some of what you were thinking about here?
Yeah, and first of all, right, I think it is becoming mainstream, but if you talk to anybody in infrastructure companies, right, like the AWSs of the world or Databricks of the world, they have been on a consumption model for good 3-4 years now. So just to ground everybody, it was predominantly on the infrastructure side of the house, but it is becoming now mainstream for application as well. But
Right, like Snowflake and
yeah,
those companies, they were all using this and talking about this from the beginning. And so when you think about then how the Snowflake CEO was like, well, we don't need CSMs. Like, well, yeah, but you just call them TAMs. They were technical account managers. But what were they doing? They were actually working from the time when sales was getting started, right? Which is kind of what you're doing. Oh, well, I'm jumping ahead. Anyway, let's keep going. Sorry.
yeah. So this is from a McKinsey analysis. Again, I think the data is out there, but both from net retention perspective, revenue growth perspective, as well as let's just in general overall growth of these companies, consumption-based model kind of trumps the classic SaaS subscription-based model. Many of you would have seen that infograph of like the fastest companies to reach 100 million, mark. If you go back and check many of them, like, you will see a Confluent there, you will see a Slack there, and then increasingly, of course, Cursor and Wiz and Glean and all of these new companies. Many of them are consumption-based companies, and the AI world, I think most of them, especially when it comes to their enterprise customers, they are all API used. For B2C customers, yeah, you pay the $20 or $30 subscription still, but predominant revenue that comes from the enterprise side is starting to become consumption oriented. The key reason is actually more than the stats. When you read some of the commentary that you see here, and these are real commentary from, when McKinsey did this research and actually spoke to customers, a lot of the customers want to see an immediate value and then want to continue the use. So use, see value, increase use, see value, that virtuous loop they want to continue. They don't want to be in a situation where you do this massive pre-commit in the beginning and then you wait to really see value and you're sitting on a bunch of shelfware, right? That model, which was like a SaaS oriented model, when you buy 100 seat or 50 seats or 70 seat, but whatever the promised outcome or the value, you wait to realize. I think that's not working. With AI, they're seeing value immediately and that loop kind of goes faster. And you can see some of that in commentary. Is
Right.
that, yeah, so that's kind of the main reason why it is becoming mainstream. I'll add a small nuance though, like when it comes to large enterprise companies though, I think there still will be a balance between like completely pay as you go model versus a large pre-commit in the beginning, because they also want the best pricing, and you generally get best pricing by having some amount of pre-commit in the beginning so that you get an aggressive pricing there, and then rest of the usage based on as you go, right? So
Right.
those are
So
kind of
like
the
what
nuances.
I'm seeing too is if there's a commitment to a certain level of spend, then they'll get decreased pricing
Yes.
and things like that. But at the same time, what's different is they're really expecting value from the minute that they start paying for it as well, right?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and take a look more specifically then how
Yeah.
things have been changing at Salesforce, because Salesforce was the first one to do licensed,
Yes.
seat-based pricing. And now this is a big shift, right? I mean, and
Yes.
you're sort of leading that shift. That's kind of crazy, right? Here you are,
Yeah.
Santosh, leading the change.
So there's a massive change. I mean, as you know, especially like take customer service as a domain, right? Every company pretty much is starting to play around with agents and starting to see significant value. So if you think of a company like Salesforce, we sold seat-based licenses for customer service agents. What we see in future today, and if you hear Mark always talks about like human plus agents driving success together, and that's the hybrid world that we see, right? Where there would be a bunch of subscription based licenses, right? Like humans who are using this, and then they will be complemented by agents, and their their model of pricing is going to be consumption oriented. So we are truly in a hybrid world. And if you think from a business sense, you definitely would start to see efficiencies in terms of the number of seats that you sold, but that will get complemented by the additional revenue coming in from the consumption model. And that's what we are starting to see in sales, service, marketing, other areas. And then MuleSoft, which used to be an integration platform, we used to be a capacity oriented platform. Now we have also moved to more of a consumption oriented platform the same way. And we as a company, because we are like 30-year-old company, will be in a hybrid world for a bit. And before we move to predominantly a consumption based world. But if you started a company today, like an AI native company, you will start consumption first, right? You're not going
And
hybrid.
and does this make sense to people? Because in part, when you start using AI agents to be more productive, then you don't need as many people because each person is more productive. So the way that we used to grow our companies and grow revenue is you would just hire more people, right? Like back in the growth at any cost days, the way that they showed the investors that they were serious about growing is they would go out and hire 100 people. No one's doing that today. At most, you want to maybe have, 10 people as long as possible, right? And so instead, what they're trying to do is show that they're being productive and they're trying to build these AI agents, but AI agents are using up a lot of power, a lot of, energy, there's a lot of expense with AI. And so then that's where consumption based pricing is coming in. Any thoughts or questions about that before we go? Because this is a key point. And then how this impacts the go-to-market teams is the next thing that we're really going to be digging into. So I want to be sure that everybody kind of gets this big shift to consumption. I see some nods. All right. Okay. I mean, it's okay to speak up here. So I'm going to count on you to speak up if you've got thoughts or questions. All right. What are some things here then in the old versus the new model where let's see. I know that too, we were talking about how it changes. Maybe it's in the next slides because we were also talking about how it changes your metrics, how it changes how you work together. Is that in the next coming slides, or do you want to talk
Yeah,
about some
yeah,
here?
we will talk about change. I think one parting thought here is if you look at last couple of quarters of uh, results from large companies, one of the KPIs that every CEO has started reporting is revenue per employee, right? Like that has become, I think, Mark and Meta started that, but I think a lot of CEOs are now reporting that. And one of the
I'm
ways
sorry,
they're
the reporting what?
revenue per employee, right?
Oh, yes, yes,
So,
yes. It's also
so
referred to ARR per employee, and
correct.
so if you
Yeah,
hear of it as APE, then that's what they're referring to, or RPE, revenue per employee.
correct, correct. So goes back to your thought that you mentioned that you have the revenue coming from the humans, and then now you have revenue coming from the agent. So you have that net new additional revenue without human addition. So the ratio starts going up, right? And I think that has become a north star for a lot of the boards and the CEOs, at least how they report. And this is where this hybrid world of humans plus agents will, I think, we see that as a kind of new normal, especially for a lot of existing companies. Of course, a lot of net new AI companies, they're starting with purely a consumption oriented world.
Great. So,
Uh, you can go to the next one, right? So
yeah.
again, this
Oh,
is
this
not.
is exactly what I was just talking about. I keep going ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Oh, what I want to do again, like I'm a big fan of nuance, right? So never take anything as exhaustive list, but it's actually guidelines. You might add your fifth or sixth bullet that you see as a change, and that will be absolutely perfect, right? But these are like the four major buckets that I see changes happening. Consumption is becoming very extremely heart of discussion in even commercial conversation. So I'll give you a very simple example. When we do now any big deals, big bets call with sales, one of the key things they want to see is, okay, give me a lens of what is their consumption pattern, right? Are they using the product? Are they using the functionality? Is it growing? Would they hit that particular mark when they have to buy more? Like all those validations for any large deal to go through, because they know if the customer isn't using and isn't getting value from it, they can't get an expansion done, right? But in the past, when all of these big deals conversations will happen, the consumption lens wasn't a massive factor in these conversations. So it is becoming extremely pervasive to all kind of commercial conversations, right? And also things like, how do you revenue recognize, right? And things like that. Roles responsibility, especially I see the sales and post sales personalities kind of blurring lines a little bit, because in consumption oriented world you actually really get paid, or you do the large deals post sales, right? When you actually close the customer and make them use a lot of capacity, and then they have an expansion, and that is the bigger deal compared to just the land. So a lot of sellers and selling functions are starting to get very involved in the post sales side of the things, and way more working closely with You call it CS. In some cases, they, AI native, they're calling it like forward deployment engineering or whatever that form. It's end of the day, it's the goal is customer success. Name could change, right? But that collaboration between the selling teams and then driving success teams is becoming way more closure, because selling teams, massive revenue is coming from the post sales activities in the consumption world, right? And
And
that, sorry, go back.
well, I was going to say, Santosh, and so another thing too. So there's a couple of things, like there's the forward deployed engineer, but before that, it's how you architect the deal, right? Because if the customer isn't set up correctly in how you structure the deal, then they're not going to be successful. They're not going to be using the amount of, of your product and consuming it in the way that they've set up in the deal. And then that could be disastrous. You can lose their trust, their faith, and they go away and they never try you again, or they don't try that product again and they just do the product that they were doing before with you, and you can never expand with them, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really critical that what you're doing in the sales process and what you're doing in the post sales process, or with customer revenue, is it's highly, it's always been linked, but it's even more linked now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a very specific example, right? And this is Databricks, and we are doing the exact similar kind of a thing. In Databricks, every seller creates actually a consumption plan when they are actually finalizing the deal, right? And this is basically they are starting to put down the use cases for which the customer is going to use before even they're signing the deal. And that consumption plan becomes that document for selling and post sales team, after the deal is done, to make sure customer is actually driving consumption in the same manner that they have defined in the pre-sales. And that becomes a living and breathing document for the entire account team to track, right? Track both how they're going to consume and forecast the consumption as well, right? So, and we do the same thing when it comes to like, agent force. When we ever do a agent force related transaction, the selling team starts with a consumption plan for that agent, right? How they're going to use this. And then when it closes, the post sales team, be it FDEs or CSMs, they work closely with the selling team to make sure that the consumption plan actually becomes real. So you're
Right.
spot on.
And
It
then
starts with the selling.
and that gets into then how you do incentives and comp across the teams, right? Because if the salesperson is just incentivized to try and do a big upfront sell, and that isn't how the customer is going to be using the product, then that messes everything up too, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at again, most of the consumption-oriented companies, even historically infrastructure companies, the way their revenue recognize is when the customer moves things in production, right? So I'll give you a specific example within AWS. Let's say you closed a $10 million deal, right? It opens in something called a consumption opportunity in Salesforce, which 10 million as the bar and then consumption as zero. And every time you move some workload to cloud, that bar will move to, okay, 2 million now consumed. And that 2 million gets recognized as the revenue, not the land, because land is just the booking, right? So even the revenue recognition process internally changes on consumed revenue versus booked revenue. And then you pay people based on consumed revenue. So that means if you are a seller, if you just booked a revenue with a customer, like signed that upfront deal, means nothing, right? Until customer actually uses it and moves it to production or wherever they have to. You don't get paid, the company doesn't get paid, nobody gets paid, right? So that is fundamentally changing in terms of consumed revenue becoming the North Star in terms of how you pay people, and create that cohesive motion across post sales and sales with that one single KPI, which is consumed revenue.
Right. And then there's a different metric you were talking about too, right? What was the metric? Was
I
it
mean, we call it
NDR?
we call it net consumed revenue or NCR.
Yeah.
So people call it CR or NCR, right? Net consumed revenue is basically where you get started with how much they consumed, how much they undeployed, and then whatever the net of it. But
Wait, how much they are underemployed, did you say?
undeployed. So, for example, you bought $5 million worth of credits, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
You deployed $2 million worth of credits, right? But by end of the year, you also removed another 300K of apps that you are deployed, for whatever reason, they didn't give you the value or not. So whatever the net consumed revenue is basically what people get paid on, right? Which is basically the amount of credit the customer using, or the amount of applications they have moved to cloud, whichever way you price it. Because it's not standard. In an infrastructure company will price it by amount of things in cloud. The database company will price it by the volume of transaction in the database. If it's an AI services company, will price it by number of cases resolved, right? It
Sure.
depends on whatever that metrics, but basically consumption of that particular metrics is what you're measuring, right?
Okay.
And
Now,
you,
Anthony, I know that you've been posting about usage-based pricing online. I don't know if there were any thoughts you had when we were discussing this.
Um, the biggest thing that I think where we have some ambiguity in the industry is the difference between usage-based and outcome-based.
Sure.
yes,
And that is one of the places, for example, in some companies that I've worked with, the solving of a support case using AI or any other way is an outcome. So it's outcome-based
Sure.
pricing
Yeah,
versus
like at FinAI.
exactly. The difference though in forecasting is quite starkly quite different. It stands out for me. In usage-based or consumption-based, as was explained, you have an idea of how much they're going to consume. In outcome based, that's not necessarily the case. You almost have to use a model, an AI model itself to predict the revenue. At least that's what I've seen now when I've been in that space.
Interesting.
no, spot on. Like absolutely spot on. I'll give you a specific example. In fact, within Agentforce world, right? We also have variable pricing. Like take the same example of support cases that you resolved. Now, one support case could be, okay, tell me where I can find this. Pretty straightforward information gathering support case, right? You have another support case. I have lost this thing. Can you replace this and ship it to me? That's not the same support case. So you don't even price them equally, right? Because you solving something versus giving an answer cannot be priced as the same transaction. And to Anthony's point of view, then you start looking at historical data, current usage patterns, and actually start forecasting how would this usage in each category will line up, and then forecast your revenue. So that becomes a massive part of the ecosystem. So then the
Wow.
customer data becomes very, very important, like the usage patterns, the historical pattern, and then being able to forecast tomorrow. It's almost like science and art mixed together. But Anthony's spot on that.
So you can't even forecast your revenue or even your team needs, right? Because like how much your team is going to do that sort of thing, basically without having AI models involved when you're
Yes.
getting into to outcome-based pricing then.
Yeah, I mean, AI customer telemetry, AI model, and a lot of context, right?
Yep.
So you cannot do that without staying extremely close to the customer. That is why there is so much of like, fan things going on around FDEs, because they kind of sit with the customer to know exactly what they're going to build, right? But yeah, very, very good actually observation. So yeah, for us, right, I think the roles have changed a little bit. CS again, just to be very, very clear, I think within Salesforce, CS was a little different. Like we moved it to a like a paid CS model about 2000, I would say 22. Yeah, 2022 we moved, where CS as a role, or a CSM as a role, is only on the selected account as a paid entitlement, right? So
Sure.
they deliver predominantly on the entitlement that we have signed up with the customer. So certain amount of support related entitlement, training related entitlement, architecture related entitlement. So they're more focused on that, but on a on a smaller subset of customers which are paid tier. But sales and solution engineering were predominantly on new logos and expansion revenue kind of a model. Now with
But
uh,
wait, so just to explain, so the idea that at Salesforce MuleSoft that you've gone to a paid CS model, that's specific to you. It's not like the whole
yeah,
industry is
it's
going
not. That's why
to
I
a
said
paid
I brought
CS
the
model. But that's
context.
always been an option, right?
Yes,
And how you do that in terms of your pricing, and if you do it on a subscription basis and things like that, then that
yes.
that then impacts your P&L and things like that. Okay.
Correct.
And
Because so in our case, CS has its own P&L, as simple as that.
right.
Like CS funds itself through the service, right?
And
So I
then
followed that model for last 5 years.
right. And then the types of roles then where you have SEs like sales engineers, that's what they're called there. But other places they're also being called, whether they're forward deployed engineers or they could basically just be called onboarding, but they have a slightly different role, right? A different, like they are being very strategic with the customer, not just answering technical questions. They're not tech support exactly. Well, even support then ends up being very strategic, right? Like, doesn't everybody get involved in the strategy of helping the customer achieve their business objectives? Or am I just off base there?
You are, but I think it all depends on, are you starting with a clean slate or are you starting with a $40 billion company, right? So when you start with a $40 billion company, you move the needle within the ecosystem. So for us, that's why the context is here important. But yeah, if I'm starting at, like, if you look at an AI native company, they are just directly going with an FD plus support, right? And in the back end, they're talking to product pretty much every day. And they're very, very involved. So if you look at in our context, so we had the sales and the solution engineers, right? And then we had CS. So the way we are addressing that is we have the sales, but now they're comped on consumed revenue. We have solution engineers, now they're comped on consumed revenue. So they care about the post-sales experience and success of the customer. Now we have the net new role, which is the consumption lead role that I lead, right? We are also comped on consumed revenue, but we are, if you think of, we are what the CS will evolve to in future, right? And in Salesforce, because CS was a paid motion slightly differently executing, we actually had to introduce this net new role called consumption lead. But this is where we are product experts and we are also extremely strategic with customer and constantly trying to help articulate value, forecast consumption, and then go back the whole loop, right? This is what we do. Like, this is a day in life of
This flywheel here, this
correct.
is what your consumption leads and what
Exactly.
you're doing all the time. So you have the consumption plan, you have a usage forecast. What is move to product
Yeah.
telemetry? Let's walk
I'll talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So you start with a promise, right? Which is consumption plan is this is what you think the customer is going to use the product of. Of course, it's mutually discussed between you and the customer. Based on that, internally, you go and forecast in next quarter how much of the capacity the customer is going to use, and then next 2 quarters how much they're going to use, right? So we forecast generally 2 quarter basis. And then based on that, in parallel, of course, you're working with the customer to make sure whatever they put in the consumption plan is actually getting delivered, right? So sometimes it get delivered by themselves and we are guiding them. Sometimes it's get delivered by themselves and a partner that they have and we are guiding both of them. Sometimes our professional services team is involved to help them deliver, right? But we are being on top of making sure we are unblocking anything that is stopping them from delivering that anything that was in the consumption plan, right? And while that is going on, we are constantly starting to monitor, okay, when we started the quarter, they were consuming, let's say, 100 out of 500 that they have bought capacity, right? We forecasted that they're going to use 300 by quarter one. We are starting to, and then we have moved, let's say, 50% of those use cases to production. Has the needle moved to 200 or not, right? This is what actually brings the reality to the forecasting process, right? Because forecasting always is a mix of art and science, call it sales everywhere, right? You're constantly learning through it. And when actually we go and monitor in the product telemetry what their usage has gone up, you go back and reconcile with the forecast, like how accurate is your forecast? Very similar to sales by
kind of going around.
correct. And then
So,
you go back. The reviews is basically when you go back and read out to the customer around their consumption growth, but also you re-articulate the value. Value is extremely critical in the consumption motion. If the customer doesn't believe that they're getting value from increased consumption, they'll stop. They'll stop this cycle, right? So
right.
constantly when we're reiterating, okay, you move this 200 things to production, you have got $2 million saved value or increased revenue because of it. That's why you should keep going, right? You
Right.
keep that loop until they hit a threshold where they need to buy more, right? So if they bought 500, you keep this loop, and then you reach to 450. They're like, you just have 50 remaining. Your forecast is for 200 more. You should buy more, right? So they buy more, and the loop continues.
But there's always a dance because they only have so much budget, but then also if they're not achieving their business value.
If you justify value, there is always budget. Otherwise, Cursor would not go from 0 to 500 million in 1.5 years.
And
There's
Mark, you
always
have
money.
a question?
Yeah, since we're talking about measuring forecasting and for future looking, I'm wondering how long you think the model will be shifted to just completely prepaying for credits upfront and then having a 12-month window to use them, so that companies aren't just forecasting and hoping that they're actually driving current revenue and able to have more stability in terms of comp for employees and just cost control.
Yeah, so it depends on segment by segment. Most of our enterprise customers, I would say 99% of the enterprise customers, are pre-commit and 12-month, right? Because they don't want that variability in their usage. Now, do they consume that capacity before 12 months? Yeah, many of them do, right? Because originally when they plan, they haven't planned for additional use cases that might come up or things like that. But enterprise segment is generally they plan for 12 months, they buy for 12 months. And what we are forecasting is they're actually going to consume it in 12 months or not, right? Because if they don't, there is shelfware, there is definitely conversation after 12 months that, hey, we predicted, but we are only using 60% of it, right? So that's where the forecasting comes in. Are they really keeping track with the use or not? In the SMB segment, though, there are a pretty decent set of customers who choose to pay as you go, right? And in those cases, I think the collaboration within them to forecast becomes very, very critical. The forecasting tool that we have built out, we actually share with customer transparently. Like, this is how we help build forecasting, because that helps them also budget and size better. So many a times we'll work with them to help, ground the forecast based on their data. So if they're going to build real time or batch or whatever, we help them make a transparent forecasting on their side so that they can figure out the budgeting. So we'll work very, very closely with them. But to your point, enterprise segment, not us, most of the large companies, they generally try predictability, and they will do at least 12 months of pre-commit and then track it very, very closely.
I want to be sure we also have time to go to the breakout rooms. A lot of the information we've been talking about is also here, kind of spelled out a bit more in detail. I would say what I would highlight is just really what happens in a consumption-based model is everyone is in customer success, because everyone has to ensure and is beholden to the customer that they're achieving their business objectives. Right? Because if they're not achieving their business objectives, if it isn't leading to more growth within their business, then they won't continue spending with you. And so, just want to, any of these details, like said, make certain that we share all the links here again, so everybody has the slides to reference. But as we go to the breakout rooms, want to be sure to continue this conversation in smaller groups and really dig into, what sort of, if you're actually in this space, what kind of challenges do you have or have you seen with usage-based? But even if you're not in a usage-based model, one of the key things you have to do is align between sales and CS and throughout all of your go-to-market teams. So what kinds of challenges are you having in getting that go-to-market alignment, and what can you maybe what strategies can you discuss about how to get that alignment? Or how does this change your metrics as well, right? So let's just go and take maybe 10, 15 minutes to go to those breakout rooms. So just a small group left here now. What kinds of learnings did we have out in the breakout rooms? Any insights to share with the rest of everyone?
Hey Jan, this is
Yeah.
Jasmine. I'll
Hey,
go. So
Yeah.
we had an awesome group. We talked about basically culture that drives cross collaboration from top down. And then we also talked about how aligning KPIs, metrics to MBOs, whether it's quarterly or annually, kind of helps support, reinforce your messaging from top down. And that's kind of the key of a lot of it, honestly, because if you don't have that culture in place, doing that from bottom up can be challenging.
And MBOs for everyone, what does that stand for?
Basically, like quarterly bonuses, management by objective, right? Quarterly bonuses. There's different terms for different companies use, but yeah, having
Right.
quarterly payouts to match with the results that the company's looking for.
Right, right. So that's where you're really connecting the incentives to your metrics, to your KPIs, to really kind of how you connect that all to the customers. And if it's not connected to the customer, then you don't really have anything to pay out on, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jasmine. What other kinds of insights? Or if anybody came out with some questions that they wanted to ask.
I can share. We had the pleasure of Santosh joining our group, and we also dived down on incentives and how incentives shape behavior, and how we shared the experience of the sales side of the house selling over capacity that then could not be used and had to reduce the size of the contract, and how that hurt one side of the house but not the other side of the house. While when you incentivize on consumed revenue and everyone is incentivized on that, then it makes a level playing field and everyone is on the same page.
You know, it's so interesting that we have two people in a row talking about consumption. There were a few people who had technical issues and stayed out in the group with me, out in the main room. And there was literally a story of one company just basically stopped, they shut down all of their consumption-based products and laid off the teams that were supporting and working with the consumption-based products, because they were not able to successfully go through that sales process to actually having the customers use it. And so it really is critical to get that alignment and to make certain that you have the incentives aligned as well, because it can be the life or death of your company and the life or death of the products, all of that.
Sure.
Yeah. Any other thoughts there as we're finishing up? Santosh?
No, I think it's very, very healthy discussion, on this, and we will start to see this a lot more, right? In terms of either products that we are like the companies we are in, or the products that we use. So it'll start becoming the second nature. But also, this is like 20 seconds sidebar. But we also starting to see comeback of a subscription-based revenue in AI slightly differently. Let's say if you built out a fully baked out AI SDR or AI paralegal, and you price it based on what an actual paralegal costs. Let's say paralegal costs 100K. You price it at 20K per paralegal, right? And now it's not consumption based. You're actually back to subscription based for an agent which runs 24/7, 365 days. And you pay it like 1/5 of the cost that you used to pay for a human paralegal. And you're starting to see that as well within an AI. So it's not necessarily, I started the session saying nuance is key. So consumption, yes, it is becoming the mainstream, but also when people are building out fully fledged out function in an agent, they might also look at an option of actually charging it how you pay a human. You actually pay a fraction of cost to the agent, and the agent does everything end to end. right? So that's also starting to show up in the AI world, especially vertical AI.
Interesting. Elba, you had a thought or
Yeah.
question?
I'm curious about the one so about the question of one usage metric. If anyone discuss about like one usage metric that you have on top of your mind that it's helpful for
Yeah.
customer success.
It goes back to what you price the product on, right? So for us, usage based, that we sell by capacity, right? Cores or fee cores, which is, so we just measure that, like what capacity they're using, what their usage patterns, what are the historical growth. That's the one thing we do. If we sold by number of conversations, that will be it. So it's always tied to how you price, right? And that's the usage you track. Everything else, conversations, sentiments, and all, they're all additive. But I think you track the North Star metrics by how you price, how you pay, right? I think that's what you track.
I would say too, though, you also want to look at leading indicators as not just your lagging indicators, because it becomes that much more critical that you understand if you're moving the needle on the things that are going to have an impact towards their actual usage or whatever that may be that you're pricing on, right? So
True, absolutely. But then I think the new GTM functions are very outcome driven versus
Yeah.
activity driven, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stay away from having KPIs which are activity driven.
Yeah.
It's the new GTM post sales world is all outcome driven, right?
Right.
As long as it's an outcome driven measure, it's great. Activity driven, it's great unless you have an extreme direct correlation with that activity with
That's what I would, that's what I was trying to say, is that if you know that if they don't do this one thing that will directly lead to the next thing, then
Right.
then you want to double check, like, are they doing this thing?
100%.
Or if it's a product that needs to have a certain feature built in order for them to do it, then you're going to go and make certain that that feature is built so that then they can go and do it. Like, where is the challenge, or where is the path? You're
100%.
checking for those to unblock the challenges or to ensure that they're using the path. So like, if they need to get to the finish line, but they have to pass these 3 blocks in order to get to the finish line, and they're not passing those 3 blocks, you're going to go back and say, where are they? Come on, let's bring you along. I'm going to bring you along. We're going to get you to that finish line, right?
100%. I mean, with AI, by the way, you can now consume a volume of data to find these patterns. You take your most successful customers, you take your most unsuccessful customers, and you can find patterns. Tell me 3 things which is most common across all of my successful customers, and that's not within my unsuccessful customers. You would start to get those insights, which in the past, for at least lean CS teams, were difficult, right? You need a significant amount of tooling. Today, you could do that, right? With LLMs.
Yeah. This has been a fantastic session. Thank you so much, Santosh. Thank you, everyone, for all of your contributions and the way you've helped both out in the community, in our Slack community. Be sure to join there, but also just in our breakout rooms, as well as here in the session today. I hope to see you next Tuesday, September 16th and October 14th at the next Success Hours. And please, let's hang out over in our Slack community in between time. So we'll be up on YouTube soon, and we'll see you there.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thanks, Santosh. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.